This happened to me in the mid-1990s, when I was also a newly independent adult. Around 11 o'clock that night, I finally made it home from work. Either I took the well-lit, frequently used sidewalk, or I took a shortcut across this dark, isolated garden. Being young and naive, I frequently took the shorter route through the community garden, even though doing so would have saved me about a minute of walking time. That night, I had a strange feeling that I shouldn't take the quick route. I stayed on the sidewalk, but no one else seemed to be there. As I walked past the garden, an enormous man appeared from behind the fence. He couldn't have been walking in front of me or right behind me. Surely, I would have seen him. Only if the garden was completely dark could he have been hiding there. Perhaps he was sleeping off his intoxication, but I doubted it. My entire being begged me to leave immediately. Now I pick up the pace of my walk. In case I ever needed to punch someone, I had my keys, which I always kept in my fist with the key protruding as my father had taught me. Contrarily, I am only 110 pounds and 5 feet 4 inches tall. This guy was towering over everyone else. Outspatializing him was my only option. I've picked up the pace of my walk and can feel him following suit as we draw ever nearer. His breath is coming in gulps. I can sense his rage radiating from him. I sped up because that's where my apartment complex is. When I got there, 2 people were leaving and they kindly held the door for me and the guy I was with. Why I didn't mention to them that I thought someone was following me, I'll never know. To add insult to injury, I was probably still trying to rationalize it while my brain was frozen, and I was desperately trying to get inside my apartment as soon as possible. I started to think things like, maybe he was visiting someone in the building. Maybe it was all just a coincidence. Don't be paranoid. Besides, they were out of there in a matter of seconds. My opportunity had passed me by. I'm currently making a rapid ascent of the stairwell. My apartment is on the 3rd floor of a 3-story building. He's coming up the stairs with me, panting heavily as he rolls up right behind me. All that malevolent vibe he's giving off. He's picking up the pace, but I'm faster. I've already passed apartments 1 and 2 on my floor, which has 4 apartments on the right and 4 on the left, and he's still following closely behind. I get off in front of 3, because that's where I live, but he stops in front of 4, even though he doesn't. He hasn't said a word and is struggling to speak. I don't think I can let him force his way into my apartment and rape me or worse. He hasn't even tried to get into apartment 4. The apartments are U-shaped, and I should mention that the door to my neighbor's apartment is very close to mine. To get in, I pound on my apartment door as loudly as I can while calling out to my neighbor, "Hey Kevin, let me in," not his real name, by the way. The fact that my apartment door is locked and Kevin's open startles the guy even more. Kevin notices the man waiting outside his door and inquires as to his business. The man mumbles something about the wrong apartment, but I've already opened my door and am racing inside, where I promptly lock it behind me. As I reached for my phone to dial 911, I overheard Kevin yelling at the intruder through the door. Kevin came by after he left to see if I was all right. I thanked him and said that I was. But the truth is that I was still shaking with fear and adrenaline inside. Again, I appreciated his help and assistance, and I wished him well. My hand was on the phone to dial 911, but then I started making excuses for myself. What the heck happened? When I got home, Kai said he was at the wrong apartment but followed me anyway. Will law enforcement even bother with such a minor offense? I'm trying to relax, but at the same time, I'm criticizing myself. When I first realized he was following me, why didn't I just run? If I felt like I was being chased, why didn't I tell the people who walked by when the door opened? To make matters worse, why didn't I mention to Kevin that he could have let me into his apartment, called the police, and then let me in? But because of my ignorance, everything was unclear, and I began to doubt my judgment. I went to see my grandparents a few weeks later, and while there, I found my grandfather reading the newspaper. He tells me a woman was raped in my building's cross-street apartment complex. He is the same person. He was recently released from parole after serving time for multiple sexual assault convictions. To get some fresh air and reconnect with nature, I drove to the largest forest in my county. This scenic area was recommended to me by the local forestry office when I asked where I could go for a quick walk away from the main trails. There was no cell phone service here, but I'm glad I made the detour because the clear sky was a rarity in the UK. As I continued down the trail, I noticed a break in the trees off to my right. I went off the beaten path into the woods because that was the plan all along, to have a more intimate experience with nature. It was fantastic. As I walked around, I observed the birds flying from branch to branch and listened to their songs. I'd been meditating for about 5 minutes when I heard what sounded like two animals fighting. I dismissed the canines as harmless foxes and continued. The sand road was a surprise to me as I emerged from the trees, but I decided to take a short stroll along it while I looked for a way back into the woods on the other side. But then I noticed a bra hanging from a bush by the road and started to investigate. I understand that people visit the woods for a variety of reasons, but this still made me feel uneasy. When I turned around, I could hear the hum of an electric vehicle approaching from the distance. It was less than 300 yards away when I first heard it. My first reaction was to try to conceal myself, but there was simply no time for that. So I nodded politely as he went by and turned around to leave. The car stopped behind me, out of sight. I veered off the main road and started walking, planning to do some more exploring. But when I glanced over and saw the car make a complete U-turn and then park again, I knew I had to reverse my path. As I re-emerged onto the roadway, I noticed a man in a white t-shirt disappearing behind the bush, where the bra had been dangling. I've left the road and am now making my way back into the woods through which I came. When I had progressed a little further, I turned around to see if the man had gone back the way he had come. Instead, I saw him cross the road and head into the same section of woods that I had just entered. Obviously, by this time I was being followed. There's no way he went in one direction and then turned into the same section of forest I was in. I didn't break into a full sprint, but I did keep a brisk pace. Since my knees are brittle and my ankles are weak, rushing could be detrimental to my health, and I still needed to get to my car and drive away. He continued to trail me as I made my way further, as I trudged through the last of the trees and shrubs before reaching the path beyond the clearing. I couldn't help but bemoan my bad luck. I turned around to look for him, but he wasn't there. I paused for far too long, scanning the trees and listening carefully, but I picked up no clues. With a sigh of relief, I retraced my steps back onto the path and turned for one last look at the forest boundary. I started to wonder if I was overanalyzing things when I realized he wasn't there. But just as these ideas were forming in my head, I saw the man come around the corner from the edge of the trees. He was completely silent and just looked at me, not willing to take any more chances. I retraced my steps back to the road and my car, making haste to leave before he could retrace his steps along the same narrow, rocky path. The man was reported to the forestry office, but they couldn't do much about it. For him to have emerged from where he did when I had made it back to the path, when I had paused at the tree line and couldn't see him, he had to have approached me from another angle, an angle that I wasn't checking. It's a good thing I didn't explore the woods any further. I'm happy I went with my gut. About him, there was no way to turn back, and only God knows what he was planning. It's a hot and muggy evening. My earphones are in, and I have the fan going to help me chill out. Since I have a second-floor room in a 2-story house, I get a nice panorama of the neighborhood below. As I zone out to some Foo Fighters on my headphones, the doorbell rings. I take out my headphones, assume it's my parents, and walk over to the door. Nothing. No one is around. My first thought is that one of my siblings is trying to pull a prank on me, so I roll my eyes and go back to bed, where I lay down and put on some music. At that point, I hear it again, but this time there are 2 knocks instead of just one. This time, however, the sound didn't seem to be coming from the door. However, my music was a bit too loud for me to hear it. I put in my headphones and walked out the door. Yet again, I find myself alone. This time, I got up and left my room, fully expecting to find my younger brother lurking somewhere nearby. There was no one in sight. I'm going to lock my door and wait by it until I hear the knock again, just to scare my little brother. Not long after I shut my door, I heard knocking once more. This time it happened at my back window. Horrified, but unable to see anything through my curtains, I felt scared, even though I was past the age at which such things should no longer frighten me. To be a man, I chose to do so. I'll clear the blinds so I can see the branch or whatever's causing the annoying knocking. To open my window, I went there and pulled back the drapes. Nothing. My mind has stopped working properly. I don't know what to think. The sound appeared to be coming through the glass, and distinguishing between a wooden knock and a glass one is fairly simple. Hence, whatever is knocking must be inside. I retreated, at a loss for what to do next. Probably just a woodpecker tapping on the window, I thought. I dunno. I guess I just needed a pick-me-up. The curtains were left open, and I returned to my bed, this time with only my thoughts and my phone for company. It was a while before I could put the recent events out of my mind. Simply put, I was scared, and my imagination ran wild. It had to be that, after all. When I turned back to look out the window, I noticed a dark silhouette outside. I stood there, motionless, and desperately wished our eyes wouldn't meet. I pretended I was oblivious to whatever was happening outside. Just let me make a break for it. No, I'll just leave my room and act as if I have to use the restroom. Someone knocked once more at that point. I knew he had to have seen me because he knocked at the exact moment I turned to look. At the moment, I feel like, as I got to my feet, I glanced over and met his eyes. The outside street light is on, and whoever it was is getting closer. I recognize their sinister grin and his ghostly white skin. His long, greasy hair complemented his dry skin. It's clear that whoever it was never bothered with personal hygiene. I screamed and bolted from my room in the direction of the stairwell. God willing, neither of my parents was on duty, but just in case, I hid out until the police arrived. But first and foremost, I had to go get my little brother and hide him somewhere. My parents' bedroom was completely silent. After looking out the front window and seeing that the cars were gone, I went to my brother's room while simultaneously attempting to dial 911. However, in the excitement of the moment, I had forgotten to bring my phone with me. Before that man could break in or steal my phone, I had to make a call, go to my brother's room and try to hide him. I retreated up the stairs, armed for battle if necessary. The window in my room was open when I got there. I went back down the stairs to my brother's room, picked up my phone, and started dialing. My phone's 911 button was already pressed. When I walked in, my brother was nowhere to be found. Since that fateful night 4 years ago, he has not been seen or heard from. It's the worst thing that's ever happened to me, and I have no idea how he got in here without me noticing. I have no idea how the man managed to abduct my brother without my intervention. The only time he could have done it was while I was in the living room and looking out the front window, realizing that my parents' cars were gone. It's tough to keep everything straight because time flies by so quickly. Everything has become a haze. My loved ones and I have gone over this scenario in our heads countless times, but no answers have emerged. Just give me back my brother, please.